Live, okay.
Okay, and we're recording now. So I think we'll just get started. Welcome everybody to a Left Coast Writers Evening featuring Wanderland Writers and their latest anthology, Wandering in Greece, Athens, Islands, and Antiquities. I'm Linda Watanabe McFerrin, founder of LCW. Our LCW mission is to support new and established writers in the production and promotion of their work in an atmosphere of community and creativity. And we've been doing that for quite a while now, almost 20 years. Our literary center is Book Passage in Corte Madera, and we are really appreciative of them. Tonight, some of the contributors of Wandering in Greece, Athens, Islands, and Antiquities will be reading from their work and answering questions after the reading. We're super happy also to announce this evening that some of our contributors actually sent work into the Solus Awards this year, as they have done in previous years. And as in previous years, the contributors who did send into the Solus Awards either won an award or were placed in the competition. So congratulations to all of you, Wanderland Writers, who sent your stories in. Keep doing it. It's really working for you. And it really makes us happy that your work is being appreciated by others. Introducing our readers tonight is my co-editor, Joanna Bigger. And she's a longtime journalist, novelist, poet, and I think the best editing partner ever. So Joanna, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Take it away, introduce the readers, and let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Linda. I was also going to just say a word about our Wandering series. I think this is the 7th in our series. We have for many years been taking this wonderful group of writers to fascinating and delicious places abroad. And then we have published several, an anthology with each trip. So this is our 7th. We've gone from Bali to Costa Rica to Paris and this to Cuba, and now we've returned to Greece. There was a previous incarnation of before Wanderland Writers and Wandering In series. There was one called Venturing In in a different incarnation, and we went to 4 destinations there. And so one of those was Greece a long time ago. So we were wonderful to have a return to Greece, and it's been fun and a great pleasure, I think, to relive that terrific experience that we had in 2019 now, going to Greece during this year when we couldn't go anywhere. So we kind of got to go again in doing this. And I will introduce the writers who read in a certain order, then they've chosen what they're going to read from. So it'll be a surprise to us as well as to you. But our first reader for the evening is Sandra Bracken, who is joining us from the East Coast. So we Left Coasters welcome her, and it's so fun to see her again. So Sandra, let me turn it over to you and tell us what you're going to read.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you. I'm sitting some distance away. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read the poem that's in the book. The poem takes place on Delos and in Mycenae. And even though the group did not go to Delos, I was there in 1997. And the experience was pretty powerful. And I was just reminded of it when I was in Greece this time. The title of the poem is Lions in My Past. Delos. I step onto the weedy terrace, looking up, not down, looking at the lions, frozen, attentive, ribs visible, stretched beyond real. Each next to the other, lined up like soldiers facing one direction, east, ready, protective, jaws agape, in defiance of history. Reminders of gentle Leto, a goddess, desperate to find a safe place to give birth. And Delos became that sacred setting. How many lions bore witness to the birth of Apollo and twin sister Artemis under the single palm tree? A miracle on that tiny, ragged island many eons ago. Sorry. The stately lions roar in silence, perhaps in celebration, in triumph, perhaps protesting the ravages of time, rendering their weather-worn stone meaningless. Mycenae. I wander until no more, the pebbly path too long in the midday sun. In the shade of the Cyclopean stone wall I sit, sense the majesty of a place that was. Taking out my sketch pad and pencil, I begin. A drawing is an intimate recording of time and place. Two lionesses, symbols of power, carved in stone, rise above the entrance to the citadel. Poised, facing each other, their strength visible in thigh and shoulder, muscles supporting the standing pose. Their forepaws rest on an altar between them. It is obvious to wonder what happened to their heads. A drawing is an intimate recording of time and place. It is obvious to wonder who passed below en route to the Mycenaean capital. Oh, the stories you could tell, but cannot. Proud Agamemnon coming home from war, returning to his wife Clytemnestra and his death. No doubt brave Orestes traveled through your gate, and sad Cassandra, who could see the future in ruins, the odyssey of ancient times. A drawing is an intimate recording of time and place. The story today is of curious crowds and eager visitors, and one absorbed in silent images. A drawing is an intimate recording of time and place.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And I forgot to say, and you probably picked it up from the beautiful poem, that Sandra is also an artist, very, very accomplished artist, and a fly fisher person, but that didn't get into this poem. So thank you very much, and so glad you joined us from
Thank you.
DC. Okay, next we will have the incomparable Tom Harrell, a man of many mansions. Hard to keep up with this man. An erstwhile lawyer and a wicked wit. So Tom, I guess we're joining you today in you're in your palace in Arizona, right? Yeah.
Sunny Arizona today. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Before I
Welcome,
start, I just wanted to pick up on one of the things from Sandra's beautiful poem, which was about sad Cassandra, because
Right.
my short story too talks about knowing the future, which is not always just what it's cracked up to be. This story is called High on Mount Parnassus. The future is a tricky thing. By definition, just out of reach, it teases us with the thought that if we could just take a peek behind the curtain, could only know what lay in store a month, a day, an hour, even seconds ahead, we would be divine, if not quite immortal. The ancients thought it possible, if inspired by the gods, to see the future. The Oracle of Delphi was famous in the ancient world for her prophecies of the future, ambiguous though they might be. Later, science told us it was impossible to know the future, and the Oracle, if she made inspired predictions at all, might simply have been high on fumes. Nowadays, theoretical physics and the Big Bang Theory teach us there might be an infinite number of universes, and therefore infinite futures. Predicting the future suddenly seems so ancient. I considered this, along with my sanity, as I climbed the steep slope of Mount Parnassus to see what remains of the Delphi ruins. The summer heat beat down on the throngs, a mix of tourists and guides, hiking, resting, explaining, complaining, and of course taking selfies. The slight breeze did not whisper prophecy. The weathered stones were silent too. Their secrets are not to be shared. Had the oracle seen this future? of decline and ruin and loss of faith, the Olympian gods and goddesses fading to myth as one god replaced the many, of tourists eager to find just the right photo op, resting their large bottoms where once she moved kingdoms? Or had she seen those many years ago that the future was not one event, but infinite possibilities more numerous than the stars? Perhaps that is why the oracle's predictions were famously opaque. Or maybe, frustrated by impatient Greeks and bossy priests, forever growing rich on her labor, she simply slipped away one hot afternoon, much like the one we endured, her face covered for shade, no one the wiser. Maybe she saw a better future in the next valley or at the ends of the earth. Maybe she saw many possible futures and left to live them all. All we know for certain is that Delphi now lies in ruins. And even if it did not, we are too cynical, too wed to algorithms and codes, now conditioned to ask Google, itself the modern oracle, to tell us what to believe. A new God has risen, created by man. You really cannot blame a girl for leaving. So how did she know the future or claim to? Was she in fact a portal for Apollo as the ancients believed? Was her link to Apollo aided by sacred fumes or prophetic waters of a nearby spring? The historian Claudian claimed that when Apollo returned each year to Delphi, the sacred ripple revisits the surface of the waters. A clear echo resounds from the shrine, and the now inspired rocks tremble to the voice of prophecy. Modern speculation is far less poetic. Explanations range from the geologic, volatile gas fumes, such as ethylene, rose from the rocks below the temple and permeated the small room where the Pythia sat, inducing hallucinations, to the toxicological, the Pythia chewed oleander leaves or inhaled the smoke of burning oleander, again inducing hallucinations, to the cynical. The Pythia and her priests simply shaped the answers to fit the politics of the moment. To the slightly less cynical, the Pythia and her priests deliberately gave ambiguous predictions, so no matter what happened, they could claim to be right and keep the donations flowing. No one, at least no one seeking tenure, seems to entertain the idea that she indeed heard directly from Apollo. The ancient Greeks had no such doubts. Kings and commoners alike traveled to Delphi to seek her wisdom. I thought to myself, what would I have asked the Pythia, given one chance to tap the wisdom of a god? Ideas crowded my imagination. How long do I have? Does true love lie ahead? Or less selfishly, is peace possible? And how is it achieved? Perhaps modern life affords us the luxury of navel gazing. I felt overwhelmed by the fear of wasting my question. Even now, I wrestle with what I would ask. In contrast, the ancient world had more practical concerns. Kings asked the best time for war, farmers the best time to sow crops. Life was immediate and pressing. What would you ask the oracle? And if an oracle can mean several things, does it mean anything? Standing in the wilting heat, I felt vaguely disappointed as I surveyed the fallen stones. I wanted a straightforward answer to my precious question, if I could ever land on it, not mystery, even if wrapped in poetry. And you have to read the rest of the story to find out if I found a question and received an answer.
Good for you.
Thank you, Tom. We're all hanging on that thread. Okay, our next reader is MJ Pramick, who is a longtime science writer and inveterate traveler, has been with us on I can't say how many journeys, and is going to enlighten us about the elusive, intelligent creature, the octopus.
Right. Thank you, Joanna. And thanks, Tom. That was good. Know thyself, the octopus in me. I used to eat octopus. In fact, I used to love eating octopus, grilled or ceviche, until I learned these soft-bodied mollusks get amorous on ecstasy. Yes, ecstasy, the drug. Scientists at Johns Hopkins University recently dosed a consortium, that's the collective name for a group of octopus, of the 8-armed creatures with the drug we call methylene dioxymethamphetamine, MDMA, Molly, X, or candy. I found all these on the internet. Researchers discovered that when given a high dose of the drug, the treated invertebrates would huddle alone in a corner of their tank. But when dosed with a small quantity, the equivalent amount to what a human would ingest, that same octopus transformed into an empathetic, cuddly, social being. When placed in an aquarium together, octopuses usually demonstrate aggressive behavior to tank mates. They color shift, turn dark hues, cobalt blue and ink black. The attacker stands tall on several tentacles, often shooting a solitary appendage towards its adversary. Lashing out much like the way they're depicted in horror films, but ecstasy-treated octopus sidle up to their fellow cephalopods, slowly exploring the environment, caressing toys, using several arms. These responses strikingly resemble human behavioral changes when on the drug. In people, ecstasy decreases anxiety and inhibitions, generates empathy and compassion, and enriches the physical senses. In octopuses, the investigators witnessed a monster of the deep, long considered aggressive, become an affectionate creature, full of touchy-feely strokes for rivals. After reading these studies, I couldn't help but seek out documentary evidence of these incredible findings. My inner scientist simply had to know what octopus love behaviors look like. Little did I know that my quick online video search would deter me from ever again eating an octopus. A plethora of films abound on octopus caresses, but I found so much more: an octopus unscrewing a jar, mimicking a flounder, and most precious of all, pretending to be a piece of coral. I'm still practicing on this one. One video showed a rather large golden brown octopus sliding in the surf along with a family who had rescued this creature the day before. The animal had come back to the same beach and spent an hour with them as they strolled along the sand. Another recording revealed a small octopus being released into the ocean after having been stranded at low tide, then returning to thank the human who released it. The octopus placed its tentacle gently atop the foot of its savior, stayed still for a minute as if in silent prayer, then pushed out to sea. Heartrending. The simple act of connection and cross-species empathy nailed shut the coffin of my octopus-eating days. My throat tightened, stomach clenched. No more. I could never be at ease with eating octopus. My culinary sea change had resolved and evolved in an evolutionary timetable over decades. I journeyed all over the world and enjoy the local delicacies as part of my travel writing vocation. How could I renounce octopus, whether in Greece, Japan, or the Caribbean, where octopus is considered a local delicacy? A friend recently told me that being served a baby octopus on her plate while visiting Japan. So delicious, she sighed. I wept at this story. The foundations of my evolutionary change occurred in the fall of 1994, when my then 10-year-old daughter informed me matter-of-factly that she was a vegetarian. Why, I asked. Oh, I don't want to eat anything that has a face. While I was a bit miffed that I'd have to cook a separate menu for her, my daughter's announcement set my brain whirring. Should I too be feeling bad about eating be-faced creatures? Was my daughter morally superior to me? Would I have to learn how to cook tofu? How would I supply her with protein? Over the past several years, I became profoundly grateful that humans, myself included, have become enlightened about the consciousness and feeling of all creatures. On July 7, 2012, the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness announced a universal proclamation on animal sentience. This group of cognitive and computational neuroscientists had assembled to proclaim that non-human animals, including great apes, dolphins, elephants, birds, and octopuses, possess pathways throughout their brain that show emotional feelings. Just because an animal doesn't have a neurocortex like a human doesn't mean it can't feel. Octopuses have neurological substrates shared by Homo sapiens that generate consciousness in spite of the fact that the two species diverged on the tree of life about 600 million years ago and looked very different to the outside world. On my first Greek voyage to the southern Peloponnesus in 2007, I discovered the gastronomic delights of the octopus. Each day at sunrise, I sat in tranquil meditation, gazing over the morning catch of octopus drying out on glass lampposts. Their voluptuous forms adorned every street lamp up and down the Embarcadero. Saltfish smell wafted up into the street cafes from the peaceful blue-green waves lapping over the seawall. Nearing noon every day, the charcoal fires flickered in front of the tavernas lining the Embarcadero. Smoke whirled upward from the burning coals, enticing the passersby. I was no exception. Previously, I had despised octopus dishes with a vengeance because of the rubbery consistency that's ubiquitous in the United States. But in Greece, I experienced an Epicurean heaven of soft textured, melt in the mouth, succulent, juicy rings. Each had been cooked to a precise point of perfection. Over the past several years, however, I've become profoundly grateful that humans, myself included, are growing enlightened about the consciousness and feelings of all creatures. In addition to the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness on animal sentience, we've learned that while the octopus genome is quite as large as a human's, it contains a greater number of protein coding genes, about 33,000, compared to the less 25,000 that humans have. This abundance of protein coding genes allows the octopus to respond quickly to their environment with an aptitude that humans don't possess. As Stephen Hawking has said, we are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet on a very average star, but we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special. Let's see, I'm skipping around here. On the next day of my enlightenment, I decided not to dine on the creatures. At the luncheon at our Vigli, the restaurant's name, the memories of potent flavors and softness of texture from over 13 years prior didn't even tempt me to taste the fragrant grilled slices. In spite of my slight embarrassment at refusing the host's offerings, I stood strong. In his philosophies, Socrates has said, always emphasize action over words. And all at once I was seized by a fervent notion. I could run to the high wall street edge and upend the plate of octopus into the harbor, a burial at sea for these creatures lying prone in my hands. Instead, I followed my next impulse. I quietly covered the oval platter on the edge of the table and gently placed a white cloth napkin on it. The pall had been placed. I entreated past and future Greek gods for the octopus's peaceful passage into Poseidon's realm. I thoroughly enjoyed my delightful Greek salad. Period.
Thank you, MJ, very much. We're all enlightened by your enlightenment here.
Right.
Our next reader is Laurie McCandish King, who is, wow, what did we say about Laurie? She's a fabulous prize-winning writer, photographer, and inveterate traveler too. And also, kind of, we always say the third side of our triangle here for Wanderland Writers, because she's an integral part of our getting together and putting together the book. She and her husband, Jim Shubin, are, marvelous design. He's a marvelous designer, and they actually do the gorgeous layout and printing for us and line up the photographs. So we couldn't survive without Laurie. And she's written many things here. I don't know what she's reading from. Yeah. Hold it up. There we go. Yes.
It looks like.
Thank you. Yes, we should. So Laurie, what are we going to hear from you today?
I'm reading from my story called My Extra Virgin Experiment.
Okay, wonderful.
I have a thing for extra virgin olive oil. Some might call it an obsession, but I prefer to think of it as a love affair. I've chased that golden grain elixir around the world, savoring its subtle inflections, grassy, fruity, nutty, My husband has waited patiently in elegant tasting rooms as I sipped varietals and cultivars and single estate standouts, robust early harvests, and pale, buttery award winners. At home, extra virgin olive oil is my favorite afternoon snack. I pour it onto a cracker and admire it there in a tiny shimmering pool surrounded by a dollop of hummus to keep it from falling off. After all, it's the olive oil I'm after. Its leafy hue reminds me of hot summer afternoons. Its peppery burn lashes mischievously at the back of my tongue. Its light viscosity slides luxuriously down my throat. It moistens my lips and glistens on my chin. I smooth the excess onto my hands and elbows. I'm often tempted to smother every inch of my body with the unctuous condiment. I did that once and felt like an awesome Greek goddess until the fruit flies started circling. It also made my bed sheets smell somewhat rancid, a decidedly ungoddess-like effect. It's not surprising then, with this obsession, that from the minute I started planning my Greek vacation, I knew the exotic liquid would have to play a part in the experience. Olive oil is a crucial part of the Mediterranean diet, which is said to support a long and healthy life. It may be that the fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, fish, and moderate amounts of red wine that actually produce the desired effect, but I prefer to think it's all about the olive oil. Anti-inflammatory, high in phytonutrients and antioxidants, and helpful in preventing maladies as varied as Alzheimer's disease, breast cancer, high blood pressure, obesity, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. It could probably replace one's primary care physician. It has even been credited with enlarging breasts when applied properly. In fact, olive oil has played an important part in the human experience for millennia. Kirkpinar, or olive oil wrestling, is the world's oldest documented sporting event, dating back at least to 2600 before Common Era, and is also recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage. But in my opinion, olive oil has played its most significant role in human experience as an ingredient in soap. Without soap, we'd still be licking our own skin to get rid of the dust and dirt of everyday life, which might be good for lingual dexterity, but it would have set us far, far behind in terms of making time for innovations and inventions, not to mention government, art, and critical thinking. One could even make the argument that soap is the foundation upon which civilization has been built. According to one legend, soap originated on the island of Lesbos, where animal sacrifice was practiced. The remains of those sacrifices, fat and ashes, flowed from stone altars into the river when rains were heavy. Women washing their clothes in the river noticed how good the laundry looked after their oblations, made the connection between animal fat and cleanliness, and soap was invented. The poet Sappho, one of the first to chronicle the efficacy of soap, is supposedly the namesake of soap making, or saponification. It being Greece, folks quickly figured out that olive oil was a more convenient ingredient than sacrificial animal fat. And so began the long history of olive oil soap making. And one of the best places to make olive oil soap, I discovered, is on a Greek island. I won't read the rest of this because it's too long, but I went on to make olive oil soap on the island of Crete. And it turned out, it seems straightforward, but it turned out very, very differently than I expected it would. Yeah, if I had been able to see the future, I think I probably wouldn't have done this, but I couldn't. I'm not Cassandra or Apithia. So there we have it. I made some very strange soap out of lovely olive oil.
Thank you very much, Lori. And I do urge all of you to read that story to the end, because you'll be laughing your brains out by the time you get there. All right, thank you so much. And next we go to the award-winning Anne Sigmund, who has done amazing stories for a number of years. And I believe she's going to take us to share with us her search for Alexander.
Thanks.
Yes.
I'm going to read an excerpt from Waiting for Alexander. Some women receive pearls on their wedding day. Jack's gift to me was a 2,300-year-old coin, a tetragram of Alexander the Great set in a gold necklace. As I floated down that candlelit aisle, the young king posed around my neck in profile of unlimited promise. That coin from my new husband rekindled my interest in Alexander. In 356 BC, at only 20 years old, he was crowned king of Macedon, a realm on the periphery of ancient Greece. And although he reigned for barely 12 years, he is still regarded as one of history's finest military minds. As Jack and I traveled over the ensuing years, we sought out sites and relics connected to Alexander, from Turkey to Persia, Syria, and Lebanon. Now, more than 2 decades after I received my necklace, we were in Greek Macedonia, exploring Alexander's roots at his birthplace in Pella, the capital of ancient Macedon. It felt like a promise coming full circle, but it was not what I expected. On a sere plain that once overlooked an outlet to the Aegean Sea, ancient Pella is today reduced to marble foundations outlined in dry grass. Only a few columns stand to recall its glory days. But as I walked through Pella's deserted ruins, I imagined the capital as it had been in Alexander's day. One of the most impressive precincts of the ancient world, Pella was a celebrated capital of lustrous stone houses with columned porticos, rich paintings, vibrant pebble mosaics, bustling shops, and a renowned library. In those days, the music of lyres mingled with the scent of lilac and orange blossoms. Painters and poets strolled the marble colonnades and lush gardens. The opulent throne room at Pella was Alexander's playground. He was curious, more like a learned schoolboy than a scholar. His childhood tutor was his uncle Leonidas, a hard disciplinarian who admired the austere customs of Sparta. Under his tutelage, Alexander was taught to forego princely luxury. He slept on the hard stone floors and often went without a cloak in frigid weather. When Alexander was 13 in 343 BC, Philip invited the esteemed philosopher Aristotle to be his son's tutor. Aristotle established a school for Alexander and his friends near a wooded sanctuary dedicated to water nymphs by the town of Mieza, about 20 miles from Pella. Mieza has been a sacred place for thousands of years. Jack and I drove there, parked, and walked across a wooden bridge toward the meadow where a part of Aristotle's school once stood. In this cool, still, numinous space, dappled sunlight played on the ivy, ferns, and vines. What I noticed most was the silence, as though even nature bowed in prayer. The meadow was rimmed by a cavernous 20-foot rock face with still visible classrooms carved into the tufa. We saw slashes in post holes that once held the roof and a colonnade. I sat on the ruin of an old well, imagining Aristotle pacing up and down, igniting Alexander's passions for exploration, for botany, zoology, medicine, history, and the art of war. Aristotle's highest charge to Alexander the Great was this: be what you wish to seem. It was a charge he took to heart for the rest of his life. And to find out what lessons I think that Alexander's life might hold for us today, I hope that you will read the book to finish the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, another reason to read the book. All right. Let's see. Yes, we're down. Our penultimate reader will be none other than our fearless leader, incredible friend of writers, a marvelous teacher and mentor who has shepherded many books that probably even with this group have shepherded them into successful life. And I will also return the compliment and say, like an editor like none other. So let me turn it over to my dear colleague Linda Watanabe McFerrin, who will read to us from
The boat.
the boat.
Not so fearless these days, Joanna, what with COVID and everything, I'm afraid. But very excited about the reading so far. Everybody's done such an incredible job, and it just reminds me of what a wonderful book this is. And hearing it in everyone's voices makes it extra special. Great readings. So I'm going to read from my story in the book, in this anthology entitled The Boatman. And our book is actually dedicated to famous Greek poet, novelist, playwright, translator, and scholar Nanos Valeritis. He was an incredible force. And this is a story about the last time I saw Nanos was on this particular trip. And I'm going to start with a poem that Nanos wrote, The Boatman, or an excerpt from his poem, The Boatman. That's also the title of the essay. I think it's also very appropriate to COVID right now, to what we're experiencing. What is there worth seeing anymore, except some beautiful woman walking in the corridor and smiling, even if it is in a hospital, even if it's a nurse, even if it's not a human being, even if it's the end or just before the end? In other words, the beginning. So that's Nanos Valeritis, Pandemonium, 2005. Vakaris, the boatman, will come for you. These were the only instructions we received as we stood facing the vast blue expanse that pulsed before us. What do you expect when you arrive on an island like Midori? Excuse me, pages out of order. Lawrence and I had arrived at Lefkada, an island situated in the Ionian Sea on the west coast of Greece. We had come to visit our dear friend and mentor, famed poet Nanos Valeritis, on Midori, his family's private island. We floated, a tiny green cloud, barely visible from our Lefkada perch, out in the wide azure, along with other small private islands like Skorpios and Meganisi. The journey had been a long one, hundreds of miles by bus from Neapoli, where we had once again run to escape the trauma of death and sorrow. It was a surreal time full of highs and lows, of endings and beginnings. Sometimes there is nothing to do but move forward. We'd been through a lot. We were ready for anything. And at last Vakaris, the boatman, arrived, and we were on the water even before we knew it. The salt spray cooling our faces, the wind in our hair. What do you expect when you arrive on an island like Midori, a personal keep floating like a dreamy raft in a sea of history? Do you expect a simple neoclassical manse of sunlit ochre with a double door fronted by wide stone steps upon which family members wait with welcoming smiles? Do you expect large salons full of brilliant thinkers from around the world? Do you expect serenity, an airy bedroom, bright and inviting, in which to open your suitcases, collapse, and gather strength before heading out on a search of meandering paths, a dappled grove, a short climb to a small stone church, deserted and under repair? Do you expect mornings full of coffee and chatter and bonhomie? It so happened that our arrival coincided with the Institute of Archaeomythology's first international symposium. The atmosphere amid the 20 or so speakers was electric, with ideas sparking new insights and sudden revelations among the assembled. Maduri had become a kind of Prospero's isle, full of voices and spirits. In the end, it was a sudden storm that ushered us from the isle. I thought about this now, years later, as we stepped from the taxi and into the searing wall-to-wall sunlight and the mad crush of pedestrian traffic in Athens' fashionable Kolonaki district. This was another journey of miles and years, similar and yet so different from our decades ago pilgrimage to Maduri. So much had changed in the intervening years. The Valeritas family was now headquartered in Athens, where we had to rely on cabs, not boatmen, to ferry us to their home. Nanos had been unwell for some time, and daughters Katerina and Zoe were wrestling with the prospect of further loss. Still, there was something desperately familiar about it. Now, as we made our way up the crowded streets of the Kolonaki, I thought back to that time on the Isle. Nanos, now mortally ill, had just come home from a recent hospital stay, and we rushed toward his apartment in the intense summer heat. At that moment, the two moments seemed to sizzle, surreally fracture, and join. Don't remember if we took the elevator or the stairs to get to the family's apartment. Perhaps it was Zoe or Katerina who buzzed us in, or maybe it was one of the caregivers who whisked us in and out of the rooms on their various missions, like the sprites that responded to Prospero's needs and wishes on his magical isle. What I do remember is the rich aubergine perfume of the moussaka that Zoe made for our lunch. Unlike the streets below us, the rooms were quiet and cool and dark, and aglow with the enormous eyes and animals and girls watching us from Katerina's naive paintings. We spoke in whispers. Finally, we stepped into the room where Nanos lay, his long white hair softly arranged on the pillow around him. He looked very much the same as he always looked, so wise, engaged, inquisitive. He was awake, and although he had lost his voice at the hospital, he was able to speak very softly. We had to lean in so close to hear him. I didn't think you would come, he whispered. Of course we've come, we replied, holding his hands, wreathing him with smiles, admiration, encircling him with our memories, our love, our gratitude for all the worlds he'd shared with us through his teaching, poetry, friendship, his example. I brought him my latest book. He gestured to a shelf, and when someone retrieved it, he handed me his newest poetry volume, Pandemonium, another vehicle to worlds that never ceased to shimmer and twist before us. The room turned blue. The bed was a boat. Nanos was laughing that short laugh of his. He signed his book. I signed mine. His daughters were singing like sirens. The next thing I knew, Lawrence and I were out on the street, the tears like salt spray still in our eyes, holding hands to steady ourselves, a sea of emotion threatening to carry us away. A few weeks later, we heard from Zoe that Nanos had passed away. Thankfully, we had not missed him. Vakaris, the boatman, will come for you, I thought, to take you somewhere new. And in good time, we will join you. So that's my contribution to the anthology, and a salute to the wonderful Nanos Valeritas and his family. And I'm going to now turn it over to Joanna, my colleague, Joanna Bigar, who's going to sum it all up with her story to close this reading. And then we will open it up to questions. And I see already a couple of questions. So Joanna, what are you reading from?
Thank you, Linda. I was just going to say before I start, I see that we have several people out there. And so I do invite you to put your questions or comments in the Q&A, because we will have time to get to them afterwards, and we look forward to that. I am going to read from one of my stories in the book. It's about the journey of the young Lawrence Durrell and his young wife to the island of Corfu. And let me see, I think I need my glasses so I can actually see something. The story is entitled Happy as Larry. On a boat from Calabria to Corfu in March 1935 were Larry, as he was called, and his bride Nancy, née Nancy Myers. She was an art student he had met in London at the Slade School of Fine Art. The aspiring young writer and painter lived a bohemian life together for 2 years before being persuaded in 1935 by an English friend, George Wilkerson, to join him on green and gorgeous Corfu. Particularly seduced by Wilkerson's news that the recently married could travel by Italian train for a reduction of 80%, they quickly married and departed. The entire Durrell tribe, including the youngest son, Gerald, whose beloved accounts of their uproarious life there would become international bestsellers, and of course, a film series, soon followed. But the young couple was intent on creating their own lives. His first book, The Pied Piper of Lovers, with a cover painted by Nancy, was published while he journeyed to Greece. He was 23. Buoyed by his success, he kept writing. Drawing on their island existence, his work portrayed a kind of paradise, one made up from myth, imagination, literature, and the whole cloth of their actual lives. It was a paradise constructed around young love. In my old age, I hope to glimpse the enchantment, the romance of place entwined with love, of Durrell's Corfu. Still, given the tragedies I knew that had followed those blissful years, I wondered, could such enchantment endure? Beyond the myths and the magical landscapes that Durrell conjured, there was his private life, with larger-than-life characters, family drama, sketches of hardy peasants, and at its center, love. Seeking that private place, we journeyed to Kalami, a little section on the very north coast of Corfu facing Albania, and we visited the White House that he said was set like a dice on a rock, already vulnerable with scars and wind and water. There, opening Prospero's cell, his earliest and probably most intimate island book, I turned to an intimate passage. Outside the White House are the singing olive trees, the coughing goats. Inside, we see a bowl of wild roses, Greek cigarettes, and Nancy in a cone of yellow light cutting cheese and washing grapes. He writes, a single candle burning upon a table between our happy selves. But I know now from what followed, the idyll of happy selves did not last. Harsh winds from Albania presaged destruction and the war to come. Also, beyond that flame of candlelight, fissures of personal destruction were soon to open. In August 1937, the couple left for several months' stay in Paris. He had been invited by his literary hero and mentor, Henry Miller, who would personally see to the publication of Larry's first major novel, The Black Book. Miller also gave himself quite a lot to Nancy with his quiet confidence by encouraging her art. And Miller's lover, the great diarist Anais Nin, would comment on Nancy's Garbo-esque beauty, her reticence, her stillness. After returning to Corfu, the unraveling of Eden came quickly. In 1939, on the brink of war, The Durrell family fled Corfu and dispersed. Larry and Nancy first went to Athens, where their daughter Penelope was born in 1940. The Germans, following the Italians, invaded Greece in 1941. The Durrells, their infant daughter, in a pannier basket, wrapped like a loaf of bread, he said, seeking escape to Crete, crowded in an overloaded caique. It sheltered close to the cliffs during the day to avoid German bombardment, and chugged out to sea by night, emitting a dangerous trail of sparks. Once safely on Crete, they soon left for Egypt. In Cairo, as refugees, they endured more strains, and the fault lines in the marriage cracked open. Nancy and Penelope fled with other civilians to Jerusalem, and from there she wrote to Larry that she was leaving him. She met journalist Edward Hodgkin, married him in 1947, and they resettled in England. Larry, meanwhile, moved to Alexandria, and there he met Eve Cohen, who would become the model for his first book, Justine, in that most acclaimed series, The Alexandria Quartet. Larry was also remarried in 1947 to Eve Cohen, the second of his 4 wives. Although the path ahead for him was paved with literary fame and fortune, it was also strewn with grief. The losses of war and family's tragedies that included divorce, death, and suicide. But does the end rewrite the beginning? That is the question I asked myself in pursuing the story, and I will leave you there to, of course, finish the story and perhaps answer that question for yourselves. And I do recommend that you get the book. It is carried by our wonderful partners, Book Passage. And so I urge you to order it and see what you find out. And I'd also like to say there are other marvelous stories in here by writers who could not join us tonight, but you'll be carried to many other parts of Greece when you sit down in your armchair while we're still locked up. So I recommend that.
Absolutely. I also want to say that the book there's a link on book. If you go to the Book Passage website, you can order the book right there and either have it, and you can have it shipped to you or you can pick it up at Book Passage. And when you do buy the book, we prefer if you buy from, of course you can buy from anybody you want, but we love it when you buy from an independent bookseller because we're trying to support them. We think they're very important in the life of literature in the US and worldwide. I think we have a lot of chat, a lot of people who are saying thank you to our different writers, and it's really delightful. Thank you everybody for the great comments. Can you all read the chat, folks?
Yes, thank you.
There is a question in the Q&A here from Patricia Bracewell, directed to Tom. Anybody else who wants to write in questions, please do. Patricia, her question is, Tom, do you think you would have asked yourself, what would I have asked the Oracle had you visited Delphi as an 18-year-old? If so, do you think your question then would have been different?
That's a great question, and I'm absolutely sure the answer is yes. I think at 18, I thought I was the Oracle, and
Of course.
I was so sure about everything. But I think more down to earth, I probably would have had more questions about how it worked, at least in theory, as opposed to kind of why it was important to Greece and why it still holds such a fascination for people today. The notion of seeing the future and how that would change, kind of to follow a little bit of Joanna on your point. I mean, if you know the future, does it change your past? And actually, I'm just going to read, there's a really short passage in my story that addresses that just a little bit. And it reads, the Pythia famously named Socrates as the wisest man in the world. Socrates replied that if this was so, it was only because he alone was aware of his ignorance. And so he pursued a life of learning. And so I think that's something I would never have thought about at 18 because I was so sure I, everything was black and white at that age, and now there's a lot of gray in more ways than one. So I think that my question then would have been very simplistic, and I think my questions now And one reason I had a hard time thinking of one is because there are just so many questions that we all have that it's difficult to think of, you know, something like, when should I plant the wheat crop? So thank you for the question. Yeah, I actually thought about that quite a bit at the time I was there, because I did think about my old self, my young self, reading the Greek myths and always wondering what Delphi looked like and what it was all about. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, that was an excellent question.
Oh, it was. Yeah. I love the part, Tom, when you said you were worried that you would waste your question.
Yeah,
I totally related.
exactly. I think at 18, you don't think about stuff like that. And as you get older, you feel like things are closing in and it's like, I've got to get it right. I've got to get it right. You know, and maybe there is no right or wrong question. So maybe that's really what it's all about.
That's true. Well, I have a question for all of the panelists, especially since we've all been sort of trapped over this for the time being. I know that we had Namibia on our agenda, and that got canceled because of COVID, or let's say postponed because of COVID. Postponed.
It is still in our sights.
Yes, it is. It's still on the horizon. So where are you dying to go, folks? I mean, is there a place that, oh my gosh, if only I could have gone here last year or there last year? Anybody want to answer that one? Anyone have some burning desire to go somewhere that got canceled?
Yeah, well, Jack and I canceled like 5 trips last year, but we were supposed to go on March 15th to Amsterdam and Bruges and do an art trip through Belgium and that area, and it was in conjunction with an art show, so we were sad about that. And we have a trip coming up that we want to do to sort of a Viking oriented trip to Norway and Denmark. And Jack has an idea of, we were signed up to go to Tunisia, and that got canceled. And Jack's working on, he's been working on different books and things during lockdown, and he's working on Anglo-Saxon history. So we want to go back to England for Anglo-Saxon history. And of course, we have are just about to get in the mail Patricia Braceball's new book, The Last and the Emissaries, which is, which we're really looking forward to. So
anyone else want to answer? Anybody else have any? I've canceled a ton of trips too. I mean, we would keep making a trip a few months out thinking, oh no, it's going to be over, and then end up canceling it. And now I just have this backlog of places that I want to go, but most of them are places where I have friends and I miss those friends so much. I would love to go to Australia again, and and definitely to England and Japan. So I'm really missing those places. But I'd go anywhere at this point. And I see that Nancy Alpert put in her response to that question. She's been listening in. Her response is anywhere. I'd like to go anywhere.
I'll answer that question too, Linda, because of all the we all had we talked about bringing out the calendar and watching this thing get X, and that one for the whole 2020 was a big X. But in addition to the places that have always been out there, and there are many, either repeat trips or still to be discovered. This has been a direct product of not necessarily binge watching, but the kind of funny TV watching we've done this year, and things that we would never watch. We do this with the grandchildren. They think it's hilarious. We've watched this program. It's put out by the BBC. It takes place in a mythical place in the Caribbean. It's called Death in Paradise, and it's a little murder show. And we discovered that was actually filmed on Guadeloupe. So Guadeloupe is now very high on our list. I've not been to the French Caribbean anyway. So So going to a place that was in a TV show that was made up of a mythical island is now high on my list. We, every week we watch that. Those gorgeous waters and the beach, and I think, oh my God, we're going. So
That's funny, Joanna, because one of the places that we went, and I don't think you can go there now because I think the Pacific Coast Highway, Highway 1 has like fallen in a certain area.
Yeah.
Lucia or Lucia, I don't know how you pronounce it here in this country, but which was featured in the movie, the series Ratchet. If anybody's seen that really dark series Ratchet. Anyway, our goddaughter came and visited and she was like, we have to look at you have to watch this. And we watched it. There was this place on the coast, this weird place called I don't know, it was some little weird hotel. And this, apparently there was an institute for crazy people nearby. And so we went there and it was really spooky because nobody else was there but us. But we did have lunch outside looking out onto a sea of fog. So
Good.
that was a fun trip.
I've just heard from my canceled trip to Jordan to watch the night sky. They're looking into it for 2022. So because I really wanted to see Petra very badly. So it'll be Jordan, night sky, Petra. And I've got a bicycle trip with a friend who's probably 20 years younger, and I don't think she knows what she's getting herself into. She might have to help me push my bike around Japan, and then also Taiwan.
Wow.
And where else do I want to go? Oh my God, New Zealand, I've never been. And
I want to go too.
yeah, that one is a real,
Right.
a number.
Wonderful.
close to
Perfect for
Namibia,
Wanderland Writers too. New Zealand would.
Yeah, I know you've been to New Zealand. That's why I got to go.
Lots
So-
to do.
Jack just came in and he submitted his question under questions instead of chat.
Okay.
Oh,
So it's
Well, that's
about the Oracle at Delphi.
Wash one's hair.
I
Right.
see it. When consulting the Oracle at Delphi, it was critical to wash one's hair in the spring at the foot of the path to the temple. If you
That's
didn't get a responsive answer, the failure to wash your hair properly was a factor.
Well, to follow up on that, I don't know what would happen now because I don't have much hair left. Maybe the Oracle would be like, sorry, there wasn't enough hair washed for me to really give a decent answer. So
There you go. That's maybe the whole problem, Tom.
So then-
Linda,
Yeah,
excuse me. I had a question to ask everybody.
great,
If this is a good moment.
good.
Okay. Well, we've touched on the subject sort of tangentially, and there actually is a story in this volume that deals with it directly, but I think it would be interesting for everyone to have a crack at this idea. And the story was written by Gail McGill, and it's called Zora or Epicurus. And the question is, which she addresses in here. So, I mean, I'm assuming we're all of a certain age. We've talked about getting our vaccinations. So given that, I'm curious to know if you could pick a place that is special to you that you have revisited from the time you were young to the time you were older, how your impressions have changed or your viewpoint has changed, or if it has, is it, because lots of us are doing lots of going back to places over time. So do you think it becomes a different place, or you see it differently?
Yeah. I just found, I was working on a different story about Greece, and I just found a picture of myself in front of the Parthenon. And I showed it to Jack and I said, oh my God, I'm the only one in the picture. There's no people.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And it's just like, wow.
That
And
has to be a while ago.
yeah. No, Greece was really, really great in that way. I think I've been maybe 3 times, and I really, enjoy going back, but discovering new things too. But sometimes it's hard to go back if you've had really magical experiences. Sometimes I don't want to go back if I think a place has really changed, you know.
Right.
But
Sometimes it's better. I mean, we went to, I remember when a long time ago, going to Paris and also to Greece, the statues all had black under their eyes. I don't know if anybody else remembers that. From the exhaust from the cars, they all, and recently going, the eyes are now, they're clean now. They don't have those dark circles under their eyes from the exhaust in the air and everything. I think that's really a very positive thing. And then I want to focus on the positive here. Then also I'm going to mention Paris again. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but everybody speaks English now. And I remember when I first went to Paris, if you didn't speak French, you weren't going to find anything. But now they all want to speak English with you, which is really different. Same thing in Tokyo, in Japan, same thing all over the world. That's changed.
Yeah, so English has become the language, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like that before. Oh, and then there's also the fact that you don't have to change currencies every time you move from one country to the next. I kind of like that. But now it's all, one currency.
But I always like collecting the coins because they were so fascinating. I've got a whole bag in this cabinet behind me, just from all over the world.
And they're useless now.
Probably.
well, I know Jack and I want to go back to France to see the cathedral at Chartres. We're undergoing a major cleaning of the windows, and we want to go back. And I think it's done now. So we'll
fishing trip to Scotland was canceled, and we were going to go with our son. So that's on hold. We will do that. But I love the idea of returning to Scotland. It's just like the more I know about it, the more I've I just fell under its spell. So we'll do that.
Good.
Sure.
They're talking about seceding again from their union, so it should
I know. They have been for some time, but
right.
We'll go there. We're going to go on a barge trip with our daughter, also in Scotland, and that's for sure going to be in 2022.
Oh, exciting!
It's just like, God. Once you get as old as I'm getting, you're just thinking, what? 2 years from now? I'm going to go next month.
Yeah,
True.
Forget it.
No. Well, Jack just said he ran with the bulls at Pamplona on his 30th birthday, or when he was 30, and then again when he was 60. So he says he wants to do it again when he's 90.
Okay, that sounds fantastic.
All right.
Okay.
He's going to run with them. Good. Okay.
Slowly.
Yeah, right.
I have one more question that I want to ask everybody here, unless somebody else has a question that they want to ask. The question that I want to ask you all is, because you've all been on one or more Wanderland trips. What was your favorite trip?
Oh, wow.
Was there one? And if so, what was it?
They're all good.
Yeah.
They were all great, but I don't know, maybe Paris. I don't know.
I want to say fuck Paris because I'm so sick of Paris, but that's okay.
No, but it was just such a good trip.
I titled my essay. Fuck Paris.
Bali was good. I like them all.
Bali was really
Andalusia was fabulous. Oh, no, they were all good.
I really liked the Japanese one because I felt I was in a Kurosawa film when we went up into the mountains and stayed at the crazy monastery. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think it might have been a venturing actually and not a wandering, but when we were in Puglia,
Cool,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, that was,
Ah,
Coolio
Staying
was
in the Hobbit
fantastic.
house was so
Yeah.
much fun with Roger, and the
Right.
bus trips were just a riot.
They were great.
Yeah.
And that was my first time ever with this group, and it was such a fabulous introduction to how it all worked. I remember for the first few days, I would watch all these people take notes and stuff, and I'm thinking, why are they all taking notes?
oh, wow, that's so funny.
And then Linda's like, okay, where's your first draft? I'm like, I think one of the cows ate it, but anyway, yeah, that was such a wonderful start to all of
Oh,
this.
the food was fantastic. I remember the plate of mussels they gave me was like huge. I had to give it to everybody else. I couldn't eat it all. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And Nancy was there too, Nancy Alpert.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we had such a fun time at that weird spa that we all went.
Oh yeah, I wrote one about that. That was weird.
That was a very strange spa. Yes, that was a super fun trip. That really was. I liked Cuba. Cuba was like
Oh, Cuba. Oh,
my
yeah.
favorite.
How could I? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
might
know.
be my favorite too. Oh,
All right, next.
Let's see. Do we have any other questions, or do you have anything else does anybody else have anything that they want to add? Because if not, we will close it up for the evening and reconvene somewhere else, also by Zoom probably.
Right.
Talk more about armchair travel through books, the books that we love. Anyone else?
Oh,
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us
Thank
for
you
this.
very much.
yeah. Thanks to
everyone.
all the viewers
Center.
for tuning in.
Yes,
Yeah.
to everybody who tuned in. Thank you so much for joining us for this. I hope you all have a nice drink and plan your next trip, because time comes soon when we can do that. That would be so
Right.
wonderful.
Right.
Thank you, readers, my wonderful co-editor, Joanna.
Thank you. It was marvelous, Linda.
Thank
So
you.
it's always fun when we get together too.
It
Okay,
is.
we'll see each other soon,
Yes.
Okay.
one way or another.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Good
Arrivederci.
night.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Farewell.